Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Our mission here is to transform complex, dense source material, in this case, a massive corporate profile, into the essential knowledge you need to feel instantly well-informed.
And today we are really peering deep inside a company that is, well, it's like the invisible engine of modern life.
A true behemoth, Carrier Global Corporation.
It truly is. We're talking about a piece of global infrastructure that operates so quietly. Most people, they only associate the name with the air conditioning unit on the side of their house.
Right.
And this deep dive is really for you, the learner, who gets that the real story isn't just the name on the box. It's about understanding the, frankly, shocking corporate architecture and the aggressive strategic choices that are redefining Carrier right now.
That's the key distinction, isn't it? It's not just an AC company.
Not anymore.
It's a global climate titan. Okay, so let's start by establishing the sheer scale we are dealing with here.
It's massive.
Carrier Global Corporation, trading as Carrier on the NYSE, a bedrock S&P 500 component.
And the numbers we pulled, they're pretty eye-watering.
Let's see, $22.5 billion in revenue reported for 2024.
And that revenue is generated by a global workforce of 48,000 employees.
And here's the stat that really illustrates their importance for me. As of 2022, their technology was servicing customers in 160 countries.
On 6 continents.
In 6 continents. That kind of reach isn't accidental.
No, it's the result of over a century of calculated growth, huge acquisitions, and more recently, some pretty dramatic surgery on the business itself.
And it's wild to think that a company that big was a subsidiary of an even larger company for 4 decades.
And then to suddenly break free and instantly start reshaping its own identity, that's what demands our attention.
Absolutely. So our journey today is structured around 3 critical moments. First, tracing the lineage from its founder, Willis Carrier.
Right, and the necessity of its founding.
Then navigating its long, complex period under the umbrella of United Technologies Corporation, or UTC.
And finally, the really explosive transition it's undergone since it regained independence in 2020.
And that transition is the most current and dynamic part of the story.
For sure. I mean, when we talk about portfolio transformation, we're talking about them selling off billions of dollars of profitable, established businesses.
Like their fire and security units.
Exactly. While at the same time making these multi-billion-dollar bets on new technologies, like that massive acquisition of Viessmann Climate Solutions.
That move really defines their future.
It does.
That context sets the stage perfectly. It sounds less like a corporate history and more like a high-stakes corporate thriller.
It kind of is.
Let's jump straight to the source of it all, the genesis of climate control itself.
Let's do it.
So we're talking about a multi-billion-dollar worldwide industry that essentially started with one man solving one very specific, very niche problem.
And when we discuss the beginnings of air conditioning, the name Willis Carrier it dominates everything.
He was a mechanical engineer, right, working for the Buffalo Forge Company in the early 1900s.
That's him. And our sources credit him with inventing modern air conditioning back in July 1902.
But the key here, and I think this is so fascinating, is that this wasn't about comfort.
No, not at all. The very first system he designed was for a printing plant in Brooklyn, New York.
And the problem wasn't the heat.
It was the humidity. The moisture in the air was causing the paper to swell and shrink.
Which would ruin the print jobs.
Completely. The ink colors would misalign. So Carrier's device wasn't just cooling the air, it was regulating both temperature and humidity with precision.
He called it atmospheric engineering.
He did. And that distinction is really the intellectual root of everything Carrier Global is today.
That's a great point. He was selling predictability, quality control. He wasn't selling a cool breeze.
Exactly. But while the invention was his, the company itself was born a bit later out of financial necessity.
So how does that happen?
Well, Carrier's initial work was managed under a subsidiary called the Carrier Air Conditioner Company of America. That was founded in 1908, and he was the vice president.
But it was still under the Buffalo Forge umbrella.
For several years, yes. But then a global conflict forced their hand.
World War I.
Right. The war starts in late 1914, And Buffalo Forge makes a strategic decision to focus entirely on manufacturing products for the war effort, their core heavy machinery business.
So that basically orphaned Carrier's climate control division.
It did. And Willis Carrier and 6 other engineers, they understood the immense potential of their technology. They just refused to let it die.
So they took a huge entrepreneurial risk.
A massive one. They pooled their personal resources, and the sources are very specific about the amount.
What was it?
$32,600.
That's it?
That's it. That was the seed capital they used to form the Carrier Engineering Corporation on June 26, 1915, in Syracuse, New York.
$32,000 to start what is now a $22 billion empire.
It's an incredible story of innovation being forced into existence by external pressures.
And that also marked the start of their physical expansion. Just 5 years later, in 1920, they bought their first factory in Newark, New Jersey.
But that early success wasn't just industrial. It quickly became cinematic.
And this is where it gets really interesting. This is the aha story that propelled them internationally.
It's 1921, and they get this bizarre challenge at Islington Studios in London.
This is the legendary fog story, right?
It is. The studio was owned by what would later become Paramount Pictures, and the London fog was so thick, so persistent, that it was literally suspending filming for days.
You couldn't get a clear shot.
Couldn't get a clear shot. It was a massive industrial headache, costing the studio a fortune in lost production time. Standard heating and ventilation just couldn't cut it.
So Carrier steps in with his atmospheric engineering.
Precisely. And the solution they installed was revolutionary. It wasn't just ventilation or cooling. It was a pressurized system that could cool air at an incredible rate. The records say 3.5 million gallons per hour.
But the magic wasn't the cooling.
No. The magic was that it delivered perfectly dehumidified, thermostat-controlled air. It created a stable, clear interior atmosphere that was totally impervious to the fog outside.
It kept the stage clear, the cameras rolling.
And it proved that their systems could guarantee perfect atmospheric conditions anywhere, under any circumstances.
That story just crystallizes their value proposition perfectly. They were selling guaranteed production continuity.
That's it. That's why they were so successful across industries. Textiles, printing, film, pharmaceuticals. They solved industrial problems, not comfort problems.
And that reputation for atmospheric mastery carried them right through the 20s and 30s. And this is when they started to make their first moves into residential and commercial spaces.
Right, installing systems in movie theaters across the U.S. By the time they went through some early name shifts, they were already well known as the Carrier Air Conditioning Company. They had, defined the entire industry.
That's a 40-year gap from 1915 to 1955. They were defining the industry as an independent company, weathering the Great Depression and World War II.
And they did it by constantly evolving. During WWII, like a lot of American manufacturers, they shifted to supporting the war effort, providing refrigeration and climate control for naval vessels, military bases,
which established their credentials in high-reliability, mission-critical applications.
a theme that comes back in a huge way later on with their cold chain focus. So by the mid-50s, they were a big enough deal to be an attractive target for these larger corporate maneuvers.
Okay, so now we track Carrier's growth through mergers and ownership changes, moving from that independent pioneer to being part of a major conglomerate.
And that first big leap, as you said, was in 1955.
The merger with affiliated gas equipment, what did that bring to the table?
This wasn't just about expansion. It was a strategic diversification into the residential heating market. This deal brought in some key legacy brands, names that still have enormous sway today.
Like
Bryant Heater Company, Day and Night Water Heater Company, and Payne Furnace and Supply Co.
And these weren't just random additions.
No. They laid the groundwork for Carrier's huge residential distribution arm. These brands later became what was known internally as the BDP division. Bryant, Day and Night, Payne.
Signaled a real commitment to the entire residential market.
Exactly. But the truly transformative event, the one that defined 4 decades of Carrier's life, that was the 1979 acquisition.
That's the real game changer.
Without a doubt. In July 1979, Carrier was acquired by United Technologies Corporation, or UTC.
And UTC was just this sprawling defense and industrial conglomerate.
I mean, they were the parent of everything from Pratt & Whitney jet engines to Sikorsky helicopters. Carrier wasn't just acquired, it was plugged into this vast ecosystem of technology, capital, and global influence.
So why did UTC want Carrier? What was the synergy?
Well, UTC already owned Otis Elevator Company.
Ah, okay.
And if you think about a modern skyscraper, it needs 2 primary systems. the vertical transportation, which is Otis, and environmental control, which is Carrier.
A one-stop shop.
That's it. Combining them under one corporate roof let UTC offer a complete building systems package to major developers worldwide. It streamlined sales, R&D, and gave Carrier access to capital that no independent AC company could ever match.
And they definitely used that capital, going on a serious acquisition spree.
Absolutely. We see it accelerate in the late 90s and 2000s. In 99, they bought International Comfort Products, ICP, out of Tennessee.
Which strengthened their hold on the mid-range HVAC market.
Right. They even revived some of those legacy names like Day and Night under the ICP umbrella.
Then the focus shifted outward, moving them into logistics.
That's a crucial pivot. In 2004, they acquired Lynn's refrigeration subsidiary, which was a big expansion in commercial refrigeration. But the real insight comes in 2006.
With Sensitech,
a company based in Massachusetts specializing in logistics and tracking technologies.
So this wasn't about buying more fans or compressors. This was about tracking the environment of goods in transit.
Exactly. This shows UTC and Carrier looking ahead. They realized that just building a refrigerated truck wasn't enough. They needed to manage the whole supply chain, what we now call the cold chain.
From farm to table or factory to pharmacy.
Right. And Sensitech provided the digital brains for that physical infrastructure. It was a clear strategic move toward managing the data behind the temperature.
And that foresight continued, linking to the whole green building push.
Correct. By 2008, the green building movement, LED standards, that was all gaining momentum. So Carrier acquires Environmental Market Solutions, EMSI.
A consulting company.
A consulting company specializing in green building strategies. This let them get in on the ground floor of massive projects, ensuring Carrier products were built into the specs from day one. They weren't just selling equipment anymore.
They were selling the expertise to get those complex green certifications.
And they backed it up by getting their own house in order.
Putting their money where their mouth was.
Our sources highlight Carrier's systematic efforts to get LED certification for their own factories across the globe. We see it in Charlotte, in Huntington, Indiana in 2009,
Shanghai in 2010,
and Monterrey, Mexico in 2011. It sends a powerful signal to the market that you're serious about this stuff.
Meanwhile, within the vast structure of UTC, Carrier was always part of this constant internal corporate shuffle.
Oh, always. In 2013, they mashed Carrier, Otis, and UTC Fire and Security all together into one giant division called UTC Building and Industrial Systems.
The idea being one single, massive, global provider of building tech.
Right, but that marriage didn't last long, did it?
No.
By 2016, UTC splits Otis back out, probably realizing the elevator business model is just, very specific and different.
And the remainder, including Carrier, got renamed UTC Climate Controls and Security.
So this entire 41-year period transformed Carrier from a successful AC company into this sprawling, diversified giant that included everything from fire alarms to refrigeration trucks, all backed by a massive defense conglomerate.
But that long, stable era was about to end. Dramatically.
And that brings us to today.
Let's discuss the pivot back to independence. So spinning off a nearly $20 billion revenue segment and an $8 billion elevator company at the same time. That's a huge corporate maneuver.
It was an incredible feat of corporate finance. On November 26, 2018, UTC announced its intention to spin off UTC Climate Controls and Security as its own independent, publicly traded company.
Carrier Global Corporation.
And this separation was completed in April 2020, which was, perfectly timed, or maybe ironically timed.
Right as the global pandemic was making everyone intensely focused on air quality and environmental control.
And as they separated, they made a physical break from UTC's geography.
A very symbolic one. Willis Carrier had moved to Syracuse, New York in the 30s. Deep Northeast industrial roots.
Right. But the newly independent Carrier quietly hinted at a headquarters move in March 2020 and settled in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida.
Geographically and corporately separating them from their old parent company in Connecticut. A fresh start.
And the true signal of their new identity comes from how they immediately started restructuring the business.
So what does Carrier Global look like today, structurally?
Independence let them drop that conglomerate mentality and focus intensely on 3 synergistic segments, all centered on intelligent climate and energy solutions.
Okay, let's break those down. Starting with the one most of us know, residential.
That's Carrier Residential. This is the face of the brand for most people. HVAC, indoor air quality solutions, energy-efficient products like AC units, furnaces, heat pumps, smart thermostats.
And their big challenge here is just intense competition.
It is. They rely heavily on a sophisticated network of factory-authorized dealers. And their competitive edge, what they're pushing, is high-efficiency, decarbonization-focused products like modern heat pumps.
Which are becoming mandatory in a lot of places.
Then you scale up from individual homes to the commercial division.
Carrier commercial.
This is where they sell the massive complex systems, huge rooftop units, giant centrifugal chillers, and the building automation for hospitals, data centers, corporate campuses, schools.
And I imagine the focus here isn't just temperature. It's about maximizing energy savings.
Precisely. They're selling the massive systems, but also the brains to run them efficiently. This segment is all about helping organizations optimize energy use, meet complex LED and ESG targets, and comply with rapidly changing building codes.
They're selling compliance and cost savings at scale.
Exactly. And finally, the segment that is arguably the most mission-critical globally.
The cold chain.
The Carrier cold chain is truly vital. This part specializes in temperature-controlled transport truck trailers, sea containers, and commercial refrigeration systems for perishable goods.
So the most sensitive sectors: food, pharmaceuticals, healthcare.
They are selling reliability, and this is where that intelligent element is absolutely crucial.
So what does intelligent mean in practical terms for the cold chain?
It means moving way beyond simple thermostats. It means high-tech sensors, IoT connectivity, advanced digital monitoring platforms.
So you get real-time data throughout the entire journey.
Continuous temperature and humidity data. It's essential for regulatory compliance and for reducing waste. I mean, if a shipment of high-value pharmaceuticals goes even 1 degree out of range,
The whole thing is compromised.
it is. So Carrier is selling the digital assurance that this won't happen, using predictive analytics to anticipate maintenance needs before a failure can even occur.
That structure shows a clear focus. But the sources indicate they are still refining it, right? The transformation post-2020 has been incredibly rapid.
Rapid is the perfect word. In 2023, Carrier announced a massive portfolio transformation. They explicitly said they want to be a global leader in intelligent climate and energy solutions.
Which meant a dual-track action.
Aggressive acquisitions to bolster the core and massive divestitures to fund that core focus and simplify the whole company.
Let's start with the biggest bet they placed: the Viessmann acquisition. Why was that so crucial?
In April 2023, Carrier announced its intent to acquire Viessmann Climate Solutions. This was huge, and it tells us exactly where Carrier sees its future,
Viessmann is a dominant player in Europe.
particularly in the high-efficiency heat pump and renewable heating market.
So this was about securing a leadership position in the European energy transition.
Precisely. Europe is aggressively moving away from gas boilers toward electrification via heat pumps, driven by climate targets and, geopolitical concerns over gas supplies.
Acquiring Viessmann instantly gives Carrier a commanding market-leading position in that high-growth sector.
It's a pure-play bet on decarbonization.
But funding that huge acquisition and achieving that focus required shedding some of those legacy non-core businesses.
And they moved decisively. They announced plans to divest their entire commercial refrigeration business and, critically, most of their fire and security businesses.
Which really illustrates the shift in thinking.
It does. Fire and security are generally high-volume, lower-margin businesses. Carrier decided they wanted to focus on high-margin, complex, essential climate tech.
And the execution of those sales was swift and lucrative.
Very. In December 2023, Carrier sold its security businesses, brands like LinLS2, Super Onity to Honeywell, for about $5 billion in cash.
$5 billion just to simplify their profile. That shows how serious they were.
And they continued that trend. In March 2025, they sold their industrial fire division to Sentinel Capital Partners in a $1.43 billion deal.
So if you look at the strategy,
Acquiring Viessmann, the future of heating, while shedding $6.4 billion in security and fire assets, it signals a decisive, aggressive commitment to focusing almost exclusively on intelligent, sustainable climate and energy solutions.
they are laser-focused on the areas where high-tech margins are highest.
Advanced controls, heat pumps, and global cold chain logistics.
We've spent a lot of time on the billions in revenue and global strategy, but for many people, these corporate shifts hit hardest right at home. Let's pivot now to the fascinating and often painful intersection of business, labor, and politics that has defined Carrier's relationship with its roots.
This is where the story gets incredibly nuanced, and we have to start with Syracuse, New York.
When Willis Carrier moved his operations there in the 1930s, it wasn't just a location. It became central New York's largest manufacturer.
It was the backbone of the regional economy for decades.
But the sources detail this consistent slow-motion downsizing starting decades ago and accelerating when Carrier was under UTC's control.
That's right. Carrier substantially reduced its Syracuse presence, and the reason they cited was the classic challenge for manufacturers in the U.S. Northeast, increasing labor and union costs.
Compared to what they could get elsewhere.
Domestically or internationally. So manufacturing was systematically shifted out. It's a standard practice for a conglomerate trying to optimize for shareholder value.
And it wasn't just the factory floor. Managerial staff were impacted too.
Managerial roles were moved closer to UTC's headquarters in Connecticut, which hollowed out the white-collar presence in Syracuse. And you see evidence of this slow burn divestment all through the 2000s.
The DeWitt plant closure in 2001, laying off 1,000 employees.
And then between 2011 and 2012, they demolished the majority of the massive manufacturing buildings on the Syracuse campus. A physical severing of those historical roots.
A powerful visual metaphor for that shift from manufacturing to a knowledge economy.
It is.
Yet they didn't entirely abandon Syracuse. What's left of their footprint there today?
Well, despite losing all those manufacturing jobs, the suburban DeWitt campus is still critical. It's their primary engineering and design center.
Employing over 1,000 highly skilled engineers, technical employees, and contractors.
Right. And it also houses the customer care call center for the Carrier brand. So the site transitioned from a production hub to an intellectual and service hub. The jobs are still important, just different.
Speaking of their Syracuse legacy, we have to pause for a moment to acknowledge the famous local irony of the Carrier Dome at Syracuse University.
Oh, the dome irony is just too perfect.
The arena was named the Carrier Dome in 1980 after the company donated $2.75 million toward its construction.
And here's the joke that writes itself. A stadium named for the world's most famous air conditioner manufacturer.
Didn't have air conditioning for the first 4 decades of its life.
It was notorious for becoming hot and humid during games. It only finally had modern AC installed during renovations completed in 2022.
That level of corporate irony deserves its own case study.
And the timing is immaculate. That same year, 2022, Syracuse ends the perpetual naming rights deal with Carrier, replacing it with JMA Wireless.
The history of the Dome perfectly mirrors Carrier's history in Syracuse, a foundational legacy that ultimately transitioned into something new.
And that transition brings us to the high-profile Indianapolis factory story, a textbook example of where corporate strategy and national politics collide.
We have to handle this impartially, focusing only on the source material provided. So take us through the initial decision in 2016.
In February 2016, Carrier announced its decision to close its Indianapolis factory, where they made furnaces, and move that production to Monterrey, Mexico.
And this was framed as a purely economic decision.
The president of HVAC Systems for North America at the time cited ongoing cost and pricing pressures. He emphasized leveraging existing infrastructure and a strong supplier base in Mexico to operate more cost-effectively. It's the language of shareholder value maximization.
And the scale of the job loss was immense for Indiana.
It was. The move was planned over 3 years, affecting about 2,100 jobs between the Indianapolis plant and a related facility in Huntington.
And then the 2016 election happens, and the political stakes just go through the roof.
They do. Over Thanksgiving weekend of 2016, President-elect Donald Trump announced he was personally intervening, negotiating directly with Carrier management.
Which was still technically UTC at the time.
Right. And this culminated in a highly publicized agreement involving both Trump and Vice President-elect Mike Pence, who is the governor of Indiana.
The resulting deal was designed to save the Indianapolis operation, at least partially.
The agreement successfully kept gas furnace manufacturing, engineering, and headquarters staff in Indianapolis. The initial announcement proudly claimed the deal preserved more than 1,000 jobs.
And Indiana kicked in an incentive package.
About $7 million over 10 years, mostly in tax credits.
So, a measurable, if partial, victory for the state. But the overall picture remained complex. That job number was eventually revised down.
It was. It later settled at around 800 jobs preserved. And critically, the political negotiation did not derail the underlying economic plan entirely.
That's the tension point.
Right.
The sources indicate that the previously announced cuts still went ahead.
They did. Just a few months after all the fanfare, in May 2017, Carrier notified the state it would still proceed with cutting 632 jobs from the factory as part of the original plan.
Layoffs began that July.
It just illustrates the fundamental tension. Political pressure can alter the timing and the quantity, but the economic logic driving the initial decision to reduce costs still prevailed for a large part of the workforce.
And it's important to note the support the laid-off workers got.
The severance package was specific: 1 week's salary per year of employment, plus job training opportunities and 6 months of continued health insurance.
But what about the long-term human impact on the workers who stayed?
That's a poignant takeaway from this. According to a New York Times report from August 2018, the atmosphere inside the plant was plagued by low morale and high absenteeism, because the remaining employees shared this looming sense that a factory shutdown is inevitable.
That Carrier had merely postponed the closing until a more politically opportune moment.
Exactly. It speaks volumes about the challenge of using short-term political intervention to fight long-term global corporate economic strategy. The employees knew the numbers.
That Indianapolis story perfectly encapsulates that tension. Now, as we move toward our final thoughts, let's consolidate what we've learned by inventorying the incredible breadth of brands Carrier owns or has acquired.
It really demonstrates their market penetration. They've acquired or developed brands to cover every single price point and segment. They're often competing against themselves on the store shelves.
Okay, let's run through the HVAC and residential family first. It's a long list of established names: AirQuest, Archaea, Beretta, Bryant, one of the originals from 1955.
Carlisle, CIAT, which is huge in Europe, Comfort Maker, Comfort Pro, Day and Night, Heil, Keep Rate, Payne, Riello, Tempstar. It goes on.
And we have to include the big international partnerships: Toshiba Carrier for Asia, GCHV for the massive Chinese market.
And, of course, the most recent and defining addition, the Viessmann brands, which solidify their hold on the European heat pump market.
That incredible array of product names gives them control over the physical side. But the focus of the new Carrier is intelligent climate, the brains of the operation.
That's where the high-margin sophisticated tech is. This is represented by their building automation and controls divisions, Automated Logic Corporation, for example.
They're not selling equipment.
No, they are selling the control systems that manage the entire environment of a skyscraper, allowing facility managers to optimize energy consumption moment by moment.
So if a company is using automated logic, they're looking for efficiency and optimization.
Dramatic reductions in operating costs. It's a core component of that intelligent climate strategy.
And then there's Carrier Abound.
Abound is their digital ecosystem, focused on the health and performance of buildings. Think indoor air quality monitoring, advanced analytics. That, alongside Noresco, their energy services company, is critical for running those massive commercial systems.
And finally, we revisit the lifeblood of the global supply chain: refrigeration.
Even as they divest the bulk of their commercial refrigeration business, they keep the mission-critical core. Carrier Transicold, which dominates transport refrigeration for trucks and marine containers.
And Sensitech, the tracking and logistics tech firm.
Those two segments remain absolutely vital to maintaining the cold chain globally. They link directly to public health and food security.
And to wrap up the corporate history, we briefly acknowledged UTEC, formerly United Technologies Electronic Controls, part of their security portfolio in the UTC era.
That past structure defined them for 4 decades, but this aggressive new focus on high-efficiency HVAC and the cold chain, that defines their future.
So if we synthesize the core identity of Carrier Global, it's a story of an industry founder who is less interested in comfort and more interested in guaranteed atmospheric control.
And that necessity drove the company through 40 years of growth, 4 decades of strategic diversification under the immense umbrella of UTC, and then a decisive, dramatic return to independence.
The final, most defining act has been its rapid corporate surgical strike post-2020. They're shedding $6.4 billion in security and fire businesses, the lower margin parts, while doubling down on sustainable, high-efficiency climate control.
Exemplified by that Viessmann acquisition. The trajectory reveals a company determined to lead the next century of climate technology by prioritizing the highest margin and most future-proof technologies.
The systems that are mandatory for global decarbonization and pharmaceutical security.
And understanding this history helps us decode how these global economic forces translate into local realities, from the painful transition in Syracuse to the high-stakes political drama that temporarily intervened in Indianapolis.
These corporate maneuvers, driven by the relentless pursuit of shareholder value, are the economic pressures that shape local communities and global supply chains alike.
And that is exactly the essential knowledge this deep dive was designed to deliver.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Carrier Global Corporation. We've covered its brilliant founding, its complex time as a conglomerate, the intense political dynamics in the heartland, and its massive shift towards specialized, intelligent climate technology.
Now, for the final provocative thought we leave you with, based on the material we just analyzed, we know Carrier is increasing its focus on sophisticated cold chain logistics, servicing both global food supplies and the highly sensitive pharmaceutical sector. That includes everything from standard medication to specialized vaccine distribution.
Consider this. How much of the resilience and stability of our modern global food, healthcare, and pharmaceutical security across the planet relies fundamentally on the precise global temperature controls pioneered by Willis Carrier, driven by modern digital intelligence over a century ago.
It's a reliance we rarely contemplate, yet it underpins our daily existence.
That is something significant to mull over until our next deep dive.